Okay, I believe that everyone that we've got is here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Sorry, I muted myself. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started, if for some reason we get disrupted due to the possibility of the rolling blackouts, we're going to reconvene Thursday at 6 p.m. And we'll announce how that's going to happen via Zoom or in person at a later time, depending on how things are going at that point. So at this time, I'll look to for a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented with the following amendments. Additional certified and classified personnel actions for consideration, item E-3.
I have a motion by Alex to approve the agenda with amendments. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? Okay. Stephanie, do you want to take the roll?
Laura?
Aye.
Dr. Hannigan?
Aye.
Dana?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Alex?
Aye.
This time we'll move on to delegations and public comments. Stephanie, do you have any public comments that you received?
No.
And then building presentation, Charles Stones.
Good evening. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. All right, are you seeing my screen? Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. All right, here we go. So Charles Stones was founded or opened in 1997. And here we have a picture. We had 10 weeks before we went remote in the fall. And so this is what one of the classes did when we went remote. They all had matching masks, which they thought was pretty cute and pretty funny. But we have a great bunch of kids and a great staff. When I made this slide at the beginning of January, we had 437 students, 40 certified staff members, 2 long-term subs, 16 paraprofessionals, 2.5 office staff. We share a secretary with Bernadine Sitz, 1 full-time nurse, 3 custodians, 6 kitchen staff, and then the youth truancy officer for the intermediate and junior highs are now housed in our building, and we appreciate having John Ariano there. We have a lot of things happening at Stones. We have robotics 2 days a week after school. The Principals Advisory Council, our different members of the student body come and have lunch with me once a month, and I ask for ideas, things that can make school better, what can we improve on. We have the after school program, which meets Monday through Thursday. Usually we have anywhere between 40 to 60 kids. And then we have the before school breakfast club, which Mr. Smith, our facilitator for the after school program, also hosts the before school breakfast club. And he has about 20 students that come into his classroom before classes start at 8:30, and they work on things like manners, handshakes, social skills. Mr. Smith also runs our gifted program, and so he is in the building this year, which is just absolutely fantastic to have that. The students attend 2 40-minute class periods a week, and then they have the option during intervention time to come in and work on projects. They built shopping malls in the first part of school, and right now their current project's about agriculture. They're running farms, raising corn, buying cattle, building buildings. They've had pseudo inspections. They actually were issued a cease and desist order this last week because their pens weren't ready yet, so they couldn't purchase any livestock to put their pens in. But it's real life learning, real life situations, and we're very, very proud to have the involvement that we have from several members of the community who are helping with this agricultural products and with this project. And then we also have several students who attend Real Men Real Leaders. We have 3 5th grade remote teachers stationed at Stones this year. Here is Mr. Kent, he teaches math. And then we also have Mrs. Akampa, who teaches reading and music. And then Ms. Crislin, who does science, social studies, and social emotional. We have several staff and student spirit days. Here you can see Crazy Hair and Clothing Day. We are learning our new social emotional curriculum this year. It's the CCC curriculum. We have 20 minutes each morning that we can work on this curriculum. Our grade level is working on self-efficacy and teaching the students what they need to do in order to be advocates for themselves. In reading, we're implementing our 2nd year of the new Benchmark Advanced curriculum and the My Perspectives curriculum. So we're putting the touches on the common assessments and so forth on what applies with our students and what works best. Our art teacher uses technology in many different modalities in order to engage the students in learning. And we're lucky that we have a certified art teacher. So each student, while they're at Stones, they'll have 1 semester of art. In science lab, this shows a picture of their building bridges. They've also made cement to see which formula is the strongest. They've constructed different, using 3D printer, they've constructed different designs. So that's been very, very interesting. And again, the students have 1 semester of science lab while they're at Stones. This shows the kids. We made Arbor Day posters, allowing them to use some of their creative juices and also help out the planet. We submitted the posters for a contest and haven't heard back on that one yet. We participated in Walk to School today, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning on that morning. The kids went outside and we walked around the building on the sidewalk for those of us who live too far or couldn't walk to school. So it was a nice community activity for the entire school. Staff participated as well. Here's just one of the many games we play in PE. We enjoy the luxury of having such a large gym, which is very nice. And then we also have our cafeteria that can be used as a gym as well. So those are the dual pictures you see there. If I can get it to go. They had a horseshoe tournament, and so we had some winners from that tournament as well. More PE. We also have the Amplify curriculum for science this year, which is new, and it's very hands-on, and I have a little video. Hopefully it'll play. It played the first time I tried it. And so with that, we're very lucky with the Amplify curriculum in that we can use lots of total participation techniques. We use lots of Kagan structures in order to get the kids not only learning the material, talking the material, going into those quad C and quad D activities that we want them to be able to do in 5th and 6th grade. They're also, right now, their science unit is on the terrariums. So they have several terrariums in the classroom that they're doing different types of experiments on. Some of them they're applying acidic water. Some of them, you know, the pH base is too high and too low. So they're looking at all kinds of effects on the ecosystems and things. Again, very hands-on. PE. They love to show what they can do in PE. Here's one of the pictures of the robotics that meets after school, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Usually the teams from Stones do very well when we have competitions, and they have 7 teams this year. After school program that we talked about, here's one of the pictures from the after school program, usually 45 to 55 students Monday through Thursday. And we're so very lucky this year that we're able to offer transportation at 5:30 when the program ends. So that's been a great benefit to us as well this year. And we're wolves, we never give up. We keep going, and it's a great day to be a wolf. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Ricks. Does anybody have any questions? Well, thank you so much for sharing all that's going on at Stones. Really appreciate it. Looks like you guys are having a lot of fun.
Thank you. It's a great school, fantastic staff, and some of the best students in the district. We love our kids in our school. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Good luck with the rest of the school year. That takes us to the fascinating district audit report with Teresa and Lisa. So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Lisa is going to share her screen and run our slides and get us up and going. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to interrupt us and ask away. Or if you're looking through the information later and have a question then, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to sit down and visit with you at any time. We're going to take it from a perspective tonight of first kind of looking at where school finance is, a high-level overview for the general fund before we look at some of the numbers specific to the district here out of the past audit, and then do a quick overview of how do we compare to some of the districts similar sized over this past year before we finish up with what we have in the as an overview of the various reports that were in the bound audit report and supplementing it. So starting out here with the graph on slide number 2. This is a comparison of the budget per pupil and the mill levy in the general fund. It's a 28-year history since the school finance went into effect back in 1994. And we started out that year at a base budget per pupil for the general fund of $3,600. And over this 28-year history, because we've included the 2021 budget numbers here for you on this, if you look at the pink line, the pink squares, that's what the mandated state budget per pupil has been each of those years. And we've gone from the $3,600 in 1994 to the current budget year that you're in right now, 2021, you're at $4,569 for the base budget per pupil. That's up slightly from 2020 when it was $4,436. But you'll see across the top that blue line with the triangles, that's where the base budget per pupil would be in the general fund if that 1994 amount had just kept pace with inflation. And so in 2021, it would have been at $6,086. So you're dealing with a gap in there. In 2021, it's $1,517, which is down from the year before when we had a gap of $1,638. But you're still having to deal with a big difference there. And you've been doing that quite well as we get into the audit and look at the numbers. You've been doing that with the use of the LOB funding, with the capital outlay funding, the increase in the mill levy there, and the spending cuts you've been making within the district over the years. So this general fund budget, as you're aware, is funded through that state mandated mill levy, and it started out in 1994 at 35 mills, and then it's dropped over the years and has stayed at 20 mills here since 1999. So that's where we're at with school finance and how it's impacting you. The comparison at the district level on the next slide is across all funds, and taking and comparing the FTE and the budget per pupil and the mill levy. And the top line is the budget per pupil. And as you look across there, here we're only looking at a 10-year period. So from 2011 through 2020 actual. This includes all the funds of the district. So as you look at increases in your capital outlay fund spending for projects, as you do building projects, as you have larger new grants that come on, that's all going to impact your total overall budget per pupil. Currently, we ended in 2020 with a budget per pupil at $16,495. It's the highest here in this 10-year period. The low was in 2011 at $12,311. But as I say, as you have building projects that go on, that's going to have a big impact on that budget per pupil. The middle line there is the FTE. It's the audited FTE across this 10-year period. It looks like it's been pretty steady, but if you look at the actual numbers, we're down from 2011 here to 2020 by about 434 FTE in that time period. And then the bottom line is the mill levy. And over the 10-year period here, it's actually averaged 49.432 mills across this 10-year period. 2020 is actually the lowest that the mill levy's been for quite some time. And just a reminder, I know you probably hear it at budget time, the mill levy, they've worked really hard, as you can see here in these last 4 years, to keep the mill levy constant. It'll fluctuate a little bit from what you actually said at the time you adopt the budget, because as you'll remember, when you're adopting the budget, you're telling the county treasurer, county clerk, these are the tax dollars we want to levy. So as they have changes in the final valuation, that's going to impact that mill levy a little bit and make it fluctuate a little bit. But you've held it pretty steady there for a number of years. And we'll look at the mill levy again here before we wrap up. Okay, the next slide, then we start getting into the actual numbers then in total for the district. And here we're starting out with the expenditures across all the funds, but we've gone ahead and have backed out the transfers so that we're not doubling up anything. And so this graph is just the current year, and it's really a good representative of if this was $1 of every dollar that you spent would be indicative of how much of it is going to instruction. And although instruction itself there is 44%, the largest piece of the pie, if you look at there's about 4 areas that if you looked at them together as being instruction related, you'd actually be at 70%. And the other areas I'm looking at are the student support services, the instructional support staff, and then the healthcare and capers, because such a large portion of that is going directly for the teachers and their assistants. So for the most part, this pie is pretty reflective of where it's been in recent years. This year, we actually had slight decreases for the annual percentage in student support and instruction, but we were up in the instructional support. And the healthcare and capers at 18% is actually up from 14% the year before. So of those 4 areas, like I said, that combines into 70% total towards instruction related, and it's been pretty consistent. And the prior 6 years, it was running 68% basically for all those years, except for one when we were at 69. So actually up a little bit overall this year. The next slide then takes those expenditures and shows you the dollars. Now, we did something a little different this year on this graph, in that you'll note our note at the bottom that the axis running across there is going up in multiples of 10. So we wanted to get the visual a little larger so that you could see some of those dollar changes that were occurring. And we mentioned earlier healthcare and capers. You see that's the third one from the top there. You can see then the dollar increase that is showing up there in 2020 on that bar as we've increased funding there. The facilities acquisition area, a couple sets underneath there, underneath the healthcare and capers. Those are fluctuating as you do capital projects. Some of the years in there that are represented here, especially in 2012, is when we started the high school and ABU projects. So as those were going on and then completed, you'll see changes that have occurred in that area. Instructions there in the middle, and you can see that's held pretty steady. And then here in the last 2 or 3 years, direct growth in that area. And then a couple areas below that is the operations and maintenance. And you can see there were some slight increases in there in 2013 and on, as some of the new facilities then came on board as those capital projects were completed. Other areas have held fairly steady. The next slide then is the 2020 receipts across all funds. And here again, we've excluded the transfers so that we're not doubling up. For the most part, this graph has stayed basically the same as it was in the prior year, or if there were changes, it was just to reverse what change occurred in the prior year. So maybe the key point out of this is we looked and said we were spending 70 cents per dollar for direct instruction areas. Here, maybe the key is that we're taking in 10 cents, and of every dollar that comes in for revenue to fund and operate the district, only 10 cents of it is coming in from our local tax dollars. The rest is coming in largely state sources. A large part of that maybe indirectly is our tax dollars, but it's not from our local real estate taxes. So federal sources at 9% was down a little bit this year. The healthcare premiums have stayed very constant over the last 3 or 4 years at 10% of the total. Looking at the dollars then, and here again, we've made the axes, those are in multiples of 10. So they're going up. Starting with the taxes, you can see we do have a slight decrease that shows up here. That occurred in about fiscal year 15. And that's really a result of a change at the state level, in that the general fund 20 mills that's paid in as part of our tax bill we all pay individually, the state is now classifying that as state aid, state revenue. So if you look across over at the state sources, you'll see that there was an increase in the state revenues for the district in 2015 and have gone up slightly since then. And that's because of the way the state is handling that 20 mills in the general fund. Other changes, you'll note the federal sources were down a little bit from 2011, had been fairly consistent, and had leveled off. In the current year, we were up just slightly. And really here the last 2 years, all because of the LINK grant funding. I think that's scheduled to continue on here in 2021, and then it drops off. So hopefully by that point in time, other federal sources will be available and replacing that grant. But currently, I think that's scheduled to phase out. The healthcare premiums, you can see, you've had a little bit of increases in these earlier years, but took a slight decrease from 2016 through 2017, and then has held very steady across those years. So we were actually down about 882,000 in 17. That's the key on those. Information then as far as the cash balances overall, when you're looking at the actual financial statements, this is a snapshot off of page 4 of those financials. But in total, the district's funds this past year were $28.2 million. That's actually a slight decrease, 247,000 down. The areas that you experienced the largest decrease in cash, the general, supplemental general was down about 225,000. The largest one, though, that had a decline was in the healthcare reserves. And this past year, it was down about 1.5 million. And in the prior 2 years, it had been coming down also a little over $1 million each year. Currently, that fund's got a balance in it, that's getting close to the point that you really are not able to have the luxury of adjusting and paying out much more than you already are, with your stop loss coverage in there at 13 million. You've probably got 2 or 3 months operating expense in that cash reserve. So your premiums are coming in routinely to cover, but you don't have a lot of leeway in that fund anymore. And I know KJ is keeping a close eye on this fund for you and working with the benefits management team to make sure that everything continues to flow the way you need it to flow. But unfortunately, it doesn't leave you with much leeway in being able to make cuts in premiums and stuff in the future at this point. So I think you went a number of years, at least 4, maybe 5 in there without adjusting the premiums. And so that's what attributed to that decline for the most part. There were a few funds that saw some increases in the cash balance. The at-risk funds were up about 295,000. Some increases in bilingual and virtual ed. The capital outlay fund was up about 408,000, and it had a balance of 8.3 million. It's one of your larger funds. But if you step back and think about that fund in light of the fact that you've got over 20 buildings in the district that you're managing, and you've got a long-range facility plan where you're hoping to be able to spend maybe 40 million over the next 10 years, that fund's probably not excessive. So you do have the contingency reserve fund. It stayed the same this past year at 3.7 million. And there again, if you look at the total expenses of the district and consider that in conjunction with that contingency reserve, the contingency reserve balance would only cover about 3% of your annual expenses. So there again, I don't think you could call that an excessive balance. It's nice to have, but it can be used up pretty quick, as you're probably aware. Then the next slide deals with the debt outstanding at the district. You don't see these routinely in the reports that you receive out of the financial reporting system there at the district, but they're detailed out in the footnotes to the financials on page 10 through 12 if you're going back at some point and looking at that. But at June 30th, 2020, the district's general obligation bonds and still some Build America bonds outstanding were at $88,870,000. You had paid down $2.5 million this past year. The final maturity on these bonds is scheduled for 2035. So it's going to be here quicker than any of us really probably want it to be. But then the other debt that you don't normally see is the employee compensated absences for the district. And these are usually recognized on a payment as it's used basis. This past year, the balance was at $938,000 and was actually a decrease of about $130,000 from the previous year. So kind of indicative that employees are using some of their accumulated leave time there. So then that brings us into the few graphs we have where we're comparing to the other districts, and we're looking at fiscal year 20 activity. And what we have, and this is based off their budget reporting for fiscal year 20. So what we've done is taken the 15 districts that have an FTE of 5,000 to 15,000 range. That's kind of puts us in there as those are the closest. The red line shows the FTE, and then the bars are the mill levies for each of those districts. You can see 457's FTE unweighted was 7,163, puts us at the 6th highest of these 15 districts that are represented here. As far as the mill levy for these 15 districts, Garden City was at 48.679 mills. That's the second lowest of the 15. Geary County continues to be the lowest at a little over 43.6 mills approximately. You know, their military funding gives them the ability to keep their levy down. The high end of the spectrum here is Andover, and they were at 67.736 mills for fiscal year 20. Comparatively, Dodge City is there in the middle at 57.1 mills. So, but we've stayed in this second to the lowest slot for a few years now. So the next slide then is just taking those mill levies and showing you the makeup of them at each district. So every district has the same 20 mills budget per pupil in the general fund. So that's the bottom bar. The middle bar there is the bond and interest fund then. And it's going to vary depending on what type of capital projects have been going on in the districts. You can see Andover's, the reason their mill levy is so high is because so much of their mill levy is going to bond and interest projects. So we're on the lower end of that spectrum, even with our 88 million out there to fund. The other bar there, the green one, is the LOB. And as we mentioned at the start, that's where a lot of the districts are using those funds to make up the gap in the shortfall that they're experiencing with the general fund's 20 mills. And then they're also taking advantage of the capital outlay fund, which is what most of the blue bar across the top is. For most districts, that's just capital outlay. And most of the districts are now at 8 mills with that. As finances get tighter and stuff, we're more apt to see some of these mill levies increasing for the LOB. And I understand that the state legislature is currently having discussions on whether that's going to go to 31% here this next year without having to go to an election on it even. So,
Teresa,
yes. Mark.
Just curious, when you talked about the bonds, paying down the bonds, maybe I missed it, but did you have the numbers on cost of that debt?
Well, I know when the district refinanced them back in fiscal year 16, and at that point in time, they refinanced it to save about 2.6 million and had an actual economic gain on it of about 2.4 million. The current rates on those, I'm sure KJ's been monitoring them because rates are down considerably.
I was just curious since you gave the annual pay down on that debt, I was just curious annually what we paid in debt cost, service the debt.
Well, the interest in this past year, we paid 2.5 million in principal, and we paid about 4.5 million in interest.
Okay. So
some of those are at higher rates, ranging from a high of 6.783 over some of the terms of those bonds to the low end is 4%. But like I say, I'm sure KJ's probably keeping an eye on it. I know currently there is some refunding going on. You do have those Build America bonds in there that make it a little more complicated. And 2016 is when you last refinance, so they may not see an economic gain to do it again soon. But we have been seeing some general obligation bonds for municipalities and such selling for 0.25% interest rates here this last month or so. So,
wow, thank you.
mm-hmm. Okay, Lisa, if you want to go on to the next slide, just a couple more here for you. We always try and equate those taxes back to the individual taxpayer level using our $100,000 home. That's the common example. So of the 15 districts, Geary County remains in the lowest spot. They're at $455 basically per home. And they've been basically at that same amount since 2017. Garden City, we're in at not quite $514. The high end again is Andover, where they're paying almost $733 per $100,000 on a home. Dodge City, then they're at just over $611. That is about where they were in 2019. But they had actually been up in the previous year a couple dollars. So comparatively looking at that, we don't have liberal in there because they're not within that FTE group, but just as a point of interest, since we frequently compare ourselves in this corner of the state to the 3 large city groups, liberal would have been at $535.46, which is the equivalent of about 51.5 mils for them. And of course, these numbers are still all based on the fiscal year 20 budget. So, and the next slide then deals with the taxes levied per FTE. And here we're using the unweighted FTE for each of the districts. Geary County schools continue to be our lowest one at $1,258 per FTE. Here in Garden City, we're about twice that at $2,501. That puts us in the 5th spot of all of these 15 districts. And that's pretty much where we were last year also. Dodge City's in the 3rd spot at just under 2,000, followed by Topeka in number 4 at 2,426. Hayesville was number 2. So the highest when looking per FTE is actually Manhattan Ogden at 6,352 there. So then the last graph we have that we were going to discuss tonight was just, we've looked at where we've been and everything, and we started out with this school finance chart from 1994. So we're ending with the USD 457 mill levy as it's changed since 1994. And in 1994, we were at 48.9 mils. And it's interesting here, 27 years later, for 2021, we're basically at the same mill levy as we were in 1994 at 48.833 mils. Had some increases in there in those early years. I think we had a lot of the elementary schools that were being built at that time frame. And then as those paid off and the mill levies went down to our low in probably 2009 at 36 mils. And then as the voters made the decision and had the election to do the new capital projects for the high school and the refurbishing and remodeling at A.B. Burt and some of the other schools, we saw an increase, but that started to level off there. And like we said here, it's been very constant over the last 5 years. So that then brings us to the audit reports themselves. Do you want to say on an overall basis that the district's audited financial statements, it's an unmodified report on your regulatory basis. We didn't have any material weaknesses noted. There were no question costs on the federal programs. So you're to be commended for that. It's been a difficult year for not only all the teachers and the students and parents and everybody, but for the business office dealing with having to make sure controls continued to be in place as they dealt with the pandemic and the related issues there. So they've done a good job. Lisa's actually going to cover the management letter points here in the next slides and let you know that they did a good job. So go for it, Lisa.
Okay. So as Teresa mentioned, as part of the audit, we're required to report to any internal control deficiencies or material weaknesses that we identified. Like she said, we're happy to report there's none. There's just a few minor operational matters that we'd like to present for your consideration. The first one deals with compliance with Kansas statutes. There was one statute violation at the end of the year. There were about 4 grant funds that had deficit cash balances totaling a little over $187,000. This is pretty common since grant funds operate on a reimbursement basis. So basically meaning that you have to spend the funds before you get reimbursed by the state. We just recommend that the district monitor those cash balances just to minimize deficit cash balances in the future. The next comment has to deal with encumbrances. Encumbrances are commitments related to unperformed contracts for goods and services, and they're usually supported by some type of purchase order or written contract. When we were doing testing, we did note that there was a few encumbrances that did not have support to verify that encumbrance that was on the books. We just recommend that there's proper documentation to support any encumbrances and that those encumbrances be approved. The next few comments have to do with your federal funds. Federal fund guidelines require that drawdowns be done on a reimbursement basis. At the end of the year, some of your grant drawdowns did include accounts payable and encumbrances. We just recommend monitoring your cash balances and making sure drawdowns are being done on a reimbursement basis. Actual costs of grant expenditures should be reported to the state on your financial reporting. We did notice the LCP did include encumbrances, which cause an overstatement of what's being turned into the state. We just recommend monitoring what's being submitted to the state and only incurring actual costs on those reports. And then the final comment that we have on federal funds is that proper record keeping and retention is required for all grants. When we were doing our testing, some of the grant documents were not readily available. We just recommend that grant documentation be maintained in a central location. That way it's easily accessible by the district's personnel. Like Teresa said, these comments are pretty minor. The district did a really good job with internal controls this year. The other letter that we include with
Lisa?
the audit. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask before you moved on. I think I understand your explanation about the statutory violations there on that last slide.
Mhm.
Is there any, I got the impression from your explanation that that's pretty routine. And so I'm kind of wondering whether there is any need to take a look at that statute so that we're not in a position of always violating the statute.
I'll take that, Lisa, if you like. I actually had similar thoughts, Mark, and went and dug into the statutes. I know the state accepts this as allowable, and I thought, you know, at some point it really should be noted in the statutes as an exemption, but I couldn't find an actual exemption in there. It's an accepted practice, and everybody knows that those grants are, you got to spend the money before they're going to pay you for it. So maybe at some point in time, they'll get some of that updated. The state does allow it as an exemption, but they don't, I was not able to find that they have specified that in the statutes themselves. We consider it immaterial, and that's why we mention it here, but we don't put it in the financial statements as a statute violation.
Okay, I just raised that because as we go along with these things and knowing the genesis of statutes and that kind of thing, it certainly is a question whether we can support KJ and others that work towards a squeaky clean audit, that we eliminate some of those circumstances. So thank you for your explanation.
Okay.
All right, and the last thing that we're going to cover is the letter to the governing body. And this letter just covers information that's required to be reported to you as just part of the audit. The first part of the letter goes over our responsibilities as auditors, which is to express an opinion about the financial statements, plan and perform an audit in a planned time frame, and communicate to you any significant matters that were identified during the course of the audit, which we did in the management letter. The letter then goes on to cover the district's significant accounting practices, which includes your accounting policies, which are discussed in note 1 of the financial statements, your accounting estimates, with the most sensitive estimate being your estimate on accounts payable and encumbrances, and then finally your financial statement disclosures, with the most sensitive disclosure being your compliance with Kansas statutes. The letter goes on to state that there was no instances of fraud identified during the course of the audit, and no difficulties or disagreements in dealing with management. Professional standards also requires us to communicate to you all corrected and uncorrected misstatements, and those journal entries are attached to the back of that letter. Also attached to the back of that letter is the signed representation letter, which Dr. Carlin and KJ signed earlier this month. And then on occasion, management might consult other accountants regarding auditing and accounting matters, and to our knowledge, no such consultations took place. Okay.
We did have a few extra slides there that we've usually included. They're in the financial statements. We weren't going to go through them tonight. More than happy if anybody has any questions to try and address those. Or if, like I say, if anybody, when they're looking through it later, we're more than happy to sit down and address them with you one-on-one. If you're trying to get to sleep some night and want to read through the audit report. But we do appreciate all the assistance we got throughout the audit process from all the district staff and in the business office. KJ's staff and KJ are doing a good job, and we appreciate the help and the disruption we cause to them when we're in, because they send us a lot of it electronically, and when we're out there, we're probably bothering them the whole time we're there because we're coming out with questions pre-prepared. So, but anyway, so. Okay.
Well, Teresa, I want to thank you for taking the time to explain everything to me on Friday. I really appreciated it. I'm not a numbers person, so it really helps me out being on the audit committee and having you explain it one-on-one to me. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For doing that. So,
welcome.
Does anyone have any questions or comments with regard to the report? Mark?
Couldn't get off mute. Thank you. Just a quick one. I know there's so many different types of grants that the district gets, and some of them are from the state and others are minor grants, so to speak, for various things with NGOs and other sources of funding. Is that all put together under that graph of grants received by the district?
When we looked at those graphs, yes, those are all in there together. And if you're looking in your financial statements at some point for a list of what the federal grants are, you'll find those on pages 53 and 54. The expenditures that were made out of your federal grant programs this past fiscal year. You'll also notice when you're looking at that schedule, it does have spelled out on it this year which of those grants you spent COVID money out of. And that was in part why the audit was delayed this year, is the COVID funding. The federal government did not release their guidelines until December 22nd. And so we had to go back in and do some follow-up additional audit procedures on some of those federal grants to ensure that you were meeting all the compliance requirements and reporting them properly in not only the audit report, but the data collection form that KJ will be filing and certifying to the federal agencies.
Okay, thank you, Teresa.
Mm-hmm. But in total, those federal grants, you spent $9.4 million this past year. So. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and thank you, KJ, for another great year. Well done. Appreciate all of the work that you've done on getting everything ready and keeping our books clean. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I think what we need to do is, if anyone is willing to make a motion to approve or accept the audit report. Alex or Mark?
I'd be happy to make that motion, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mark's making the motion. Is there a second? Alex is seconding. Is there any discussion? Okay, Stephanie, would you like to call the roll, please?
Laura,
Aye.
Dr. Hannigan,
Aye.
Dana,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Alex.
Aye.
Thank you. Stephanie, did we have any correspondence?
No.
Then moving on to the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So motion to approve the consent agenda, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mark. Is there any discussion? Stephanie, would you like to call the roll?
Laura,
Aye.
Dr. Hannigan,
Aye.
Dana,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Alex.
Aye.
So that moves us into curriculum reports and Board of Education goals updates. Dr. Carlin, who's going to start us off with that?
I believe Linda's going to start us off on that.
Great.
Yeah. I'm going to start us off at 1.8, board goal 1.8. We're going to talk about the top 5 board goals first. 1.8 is AVID. We continue to train staff on AVID. The turnover with staff and maintaining that training is probably one of the main concerns that Jenny deals with year after year. So we continue to get requests to go to trainings. This year was difficult, obviously. They did not have any in-person trainings and really didn't want to have too many of the virtual. That comes from AVID, not our choice. But they are planning on something this summer, and we're going to be sending 10 teachers to that. One of the things that we talked about with turnover with Jenny is that the new teachers coming in obviously aren't going to have that certification or that endorsement. So how do they get the training? And we decided that it's just too much to learn coming in as a brand new teacher to Garden City and everything that hits your plate. So what we're going to do is let them complete their first year and then get them trained the summer between their first and second year. So there will be a 1-year lag there, but we also know then that they plan on staying and coming back after that first year as well. So kind of serves a dual purpose there. The staff is just getting ready to start the coaching and certification instrument. So that is the paperwork that we look at each year for AVID to see where we're at in progressing as an AVID school. Last year we were at the very basics, so we're hoping to kind of move up on that a little bit. We do have AVID Twitter chats each month and other activities at the schools. There are weekly PLCs, so they're keeping up the activities. I personally went to one on Meaningful Writing to Learn Twitter chat, so that was a lot of fun, and the staff really seemed to enjoy that relaxed atmosphere, do it from home kind of thing. So that's really good. The next board goal that we're going to talk about is 1.9. That is challenging and rigorous academic experiences. We have several brand new curriculums this year, new science, music, art. So all of those involve new trainings for staff, new science standards for all of the teachers as well. One of the things that we're hearing across the board is the rigor and just how wonderful, you heard a little bit from Amy, the new science curriculum is and the new reading curriculum, but especially the science is hands-on. It incorporates those new standards and the teachers are really enjoying it, as are the students. We do have common assessments for math, and this year, with it being the second year for ELA, in spite of COVID, our ELA teachers got together last summer and wrote new common assessments for the new curriculum. So those are implemented this year as well for the first time. We purchased Dreambox at the beginning of the year using some of the CARES expenditures. That is a program similar to Fast Forward that allows the students to work on math. We felt like that was a weakness. We had the the ELA component with Fast Forward, but nothing for math. The schools are using that quite a bit and seeing some real nice growth in some skills. The nice thing that Dreambox allows you to do is you can pinpoint the standards that the students need to work on. So for example, several of our schools gave the interim state assessment, and it came back and said, these are the skills that each of your students did well on, and these are the skills that they need to work on. And so then they are able to specify which of those Dreambox tasks that they want the students to work on, so they can individualize each one based on what the students are missing or already have. We also did strategic planning with Melissa Fast. She came in and worked with our staff. Every single building went through this training on how to identify what students are missing before they go into a new unit and what steps they can take as they teach that new unit. Rather than go back and pre-teach and lose time, we can continue to move through the curriculum and do activities as we're teaching the new material to make up lost skills from last year. I think that is kind of the nutshell version of 1.8 and 1.9. I'm going to flip it over now to Heath, I think.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to cover board goal 3.4, assesses indicators of unhealthy student behaviors to include alcohol and drug abuse, and provide appropriate support and resources for students, staff, and families. This group has been meeting since September, kind of doing an initial analysis of where they thought our needs were, and they developed 2 goal areas, internet safety and developing resilience. They've utilized a document that was put out by the state, the Mental Health Task Force document, to help identify those needs. They've also applied for the Kansas Can recognition program, although our results aren't back yet. Based on the analysis of the rubric, we believe we're probably going to fall into the bronze category, so still have some work left there to do. But analyzing a couple different needs in terms of our areas of growth, one of which is to dive into our information that we're getting back and really start to break that down into subgroups that might need some initial help. There's 4 other areas that kind of are recommendations, if you will, on your document that are bulleted there as areas of growth, things that this committee will then start to address. Suzette's on the call tonight, so just shout out to her. Tons of PD has been focused this year in this area, and I won't go through all of those, but you can see those in the bulleted and bold text that you have on your document. So thanks, Suzette, for all of your work in regards to social emotional well-being. The data that they collected in terms of drug and alcohol, tobacco, the discipline data is actually down, which is awesome. Still needs some work there, but it's down in evaluating our middle schools, high schools, alternative school. But there's a little bit of information coming out in the Communities of Care survey that still, again, shows more work in this area. So the actual reality of students having infractions and us dealing with that is down. But when you start to interview kids based on this survey, they're not answering. They're answering correctly, but it's not in the direction that we want to have that go. Additionally, we started using a Stop It app. And this is an application that kids can get on and essentially cry for help. It can either be for themselves, it can be for somebody that they know in the school district. Dr. Carlin and Glenda are our person who gets contacted, but that's also connected with our police department, so that if there's an initial threat, a severe emergency, it almost kind of bypasses us, goes right to the PD. And so you'll have some data in your document to show, where these areas typically fall under. It's probably pretty small, pretty hard to read, but threats, intimidation's a category, bullying, cyber abuse, cyberbullying, drug and alcohol offenses, physical assault, self-harm, and then anything that would be unsubstantiated. And so that's been a really good app and one that has been, I think, well used. KJ is going to talk about 3.5.
I will. Thank you, Heath. 3.5 is on growing school partnerships in the community with businesses, industry, Garden City Community College, other school districts, and community agencies, which are beneficial to students, community partners, and the school. So this is one area that we always continue to try and find new ways in which we can be creative. And one of the new things that they've done is in conjunction with Finney County Economic Development and Empirical, they have 4 new industrial machine mechanic degree program classes that are going to be offered for dual credit. So that was a good partnership there. The Finney County Workforce Connection Youth Development Committee developed a virtual freshman career fair. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they weren't able to have their freshman career fair in person. So that partnership was able to result in a virtual career fair, which was helpful for the Freshman Academy. And one of the things that kind of spinned off from that as well is because they weren't able to have that in person, everybody come at once so I can talk to you about what different careers could be. They also are hosting career chats where people from industry and other businesses in Garden City will come in one at a time and be able to visit with those students that would have an interest in that type of business. So those little career chats are small little fairs, but multiple throughout the year so that they are not really fairs, but just smaller groups of people. Additionally, Empirical will be visiting the school in early March to talk to the students about the career opportunities and the opportunities that are going to come when their business comes to town and everything's up and running, and what educational paths those students will need to be on it should they want to have a position at Empirical. Let's see, moving on to 7.1, which is developing and implementing a comprehensive district technology plan, which will encompass the existing K-8 technology plan, the GCHS one-to-one learning initiative, and other district needs. So this is one where technology has been extremely busy this year, obviously. So we have sped up the timeline for our one-to-one initiative. We now have iPads in every K through 12 students' hands. So there's over 7,300 iPads that are assigned to students. We also have 718 iPads that are assigned to staff. So they've worked really hard to try to get more iPads into not only student hands, but staff hands, because as more work is done remotely, we now have paras and more staff that can assist and help those students with their remote learning when needed. They have had to obviously continue to monitor the hotline. You can only imagine when we went remote in December, the number of calls that they received from not only staff, but parents at home trying to figure out how to get connected to Zoom sessions and how do I make this work. And our technology group was right on top of that. They're continuing with the one-to-one tech plan. As we said, that's a little ahead of itself now, but they've continued with the 1st and 8th grade staff development that was on schedule for that. And then in addition, plenty of Zoom meetings and trainings that they've had going through, and they're constantly emails come out from technology. There's plenty of support for staff no matter which way they need support. Any questions on either of those? Okay, I think I'll hand it back to Glenda then.
And before I start 1.4, I just want to point out that those top 5 board goals are also our KISA goals. So the nice progress that we're seeing on many of those will also be reflective in our KISA growth update. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's coming up in April. So the next one I want to talk about is 1.4. That is improved graduation and dropout rates. The 2020 district graduation rate was 86.2%. The graduation rate for Garden City High School was 90.3. So we're really, really proud to see that jump up there to the 90% range. 400 total graduates, and that included The largest subgroup was white at 93.7%, Hispanic at 89.3%, free lunch 87%, and reduced lunch at 96%. So some real nice gains across the board there. Graduation rate for the Garden City Alternative Center for the class of 2020 was 67.7%, which is almost a 20% increase from 47.8 in 2017. And I might also note that they've been on, as a school, on improvement with the state for their graduation rate. So they're seeing some real nice work being completed there and some real nice growth. The virtual academy itself was 65.4%, and the alternative high school was 70% for 109 total graduates on that. And their subgroups included white at 63%, Hispanic at 70%, free lunch at 62.7%, reduced lunch at 81.8%. Okay, and I think now it goes to Dr. Carlin.
Comment on that real quick?
Yes.
It's really exciting to see it posted like every other day almost that somebody new's graduated from the virtual academy.
Yes.
So,
yes, I love seeing those posts, and they announce it when it happens over at the virtual academy. So Kathleen does a really nice job of those celebrations. Absolutely.
Yeah, she does a great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to report a little bit on Goal 1.7, increase opportunities for STEAM learning across the district. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Going to focus tonight on technology and arts. Even in the times of the pandemic, examples in all these areas where we're making progress, our GCHS robotics team shifted gears and has been competing in virtual events. We have, and KJ mentioned a little bit, some partnerships with Garden City Community College. Probably one of the biggest ones is with them and Empirical. And so if you're not familiar, the enormous pile of dirt out on Highway 50 as you leave town to head towards Dodge is the beginning of a $500 million facility that Empirical is putting in Garden City. One of their primary concerns in making their decision a couple of years ago about locating in Garden City was availability of a qualified workforce. And so we've been happy to partner with them, EcoDevo, the community college, to help address that issue for them. So we have developed pathways, and as KJ mentioned, Empirical will be helping recruit and visiting with students at the high school this spring, and these courses are being approved as we speak and developed and approved as we speak. And we hope to have students enrolled. Well, we don't hope to, we will have students enrolled and starting work towards that this coming fall. We also have a partnership with Garden City Community College to bring back some introductory automotive technology courses to JDA. This year, those courses were completely students from the Garden City Alternate Education Center. So far has been a really big success. The college provides the instructor, we've provided the facility, and students. Next year, we will expand that to allow students from Garden City High School to participate, as well as our alternative school students, and potentially students from other school districts. Seeing great things there. We've also connected with the college and will be offering a dual credit computer science class that will feed into their computer security, cyber security program. So creating more dual credit opportunities for Garden City High School students to do before they graduate from high school. In terms of our arts programs, our drama program started the year with a play production, which was actually written and adapted by a couple of our staff members. They did that performance, taking all the COVID protocols into account, wearing masks and making adjustments as necessary. That couldn't be outdone with that. So when they began preparing to produce a Disney musical, remote learning occurred. So they shifted gears and shifted to doing rehearsals virtually, and continued to make progress. And when we were fortunate to be able to go back to fewer restrictions, they were able here a couple of weeks ago to complete and perform their production, the Disney musical. And it was an amazing production. Although we had some audience limitations, size limitations due to our precautionary measures, their performances were outstanding. We also had our vocal music department that when it became time for the winter concerts, our precautions did not allow face-to-face. So they did some amazing things with kind of a virtual performance. So we included links to those performances, videos of those performances in the description. So if you haven't had a chance to see those were truly amazing, and I would suggest you take a few minutes and watch those. They did a phenomenal job. We also have been able, since we came back to school after the holiday break, we've been able to have some face-to-face concerts with our middle schools. And I know the high school choir, show choir, conducted their annual Singing Valentine. And due to the COVID precautions and this dose of bad weather that we're dealing with, they did some pretty remarkable stuff with doing recorded versions of these Valentines. So the lucky recipients from those Valentines not only got a little pick-me-up last Thursday and Friday, but they have a recorded version of this that they can keep forever and ever and share with family over and over again. So some real amazing work. And again, we're just highlighting a few of the great things that have happened in those programs during this time.
Mark, you had a question?
Oh, yep.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Steve, when we accept students from other districts in these programs, is that like a memorandum of understanding with the other district? What's the mechanism we use for that kind of involvement?
For accepting students into what programs, Mark? Into music programs?
Into the classes you were describing, auto mechanics and some of these new classes.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So if we accept just high school students, they're Garden City high school students. Of course, there is nothing required for that. Right. But if we are going to do enrollment with area schools, we will have to do a memorandum of understanding with those districts. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Before I go on to share the last goal that we're going to talk about, so I was a recipient of the Valentines, and just again to talk about Dr. Carlin's work that group did. It's not just recorded, so everybody got it. Every one of those was personalized. So mine was just for me. My wife got one as well, just for her. I mean, it was amazing. So yeah, if you were lucky enough to get them, it was definitely a treat. The last goal that we'll talk about tonight is 2.1. Continue to refine recruiting, hiring, retention practices, and support for teachers, including innovative and traditional approaches to increase the number of high qualified staff in the district. So we've talked a little bit about this, I think, in the past, just the impact that COVID has had in terms of what I would consider traditional recruiting. All of our recruiting fairs have now completely virtual. We have not had a face-to-face career fair, nor does there seem to be one on the horizon. So for the numbers, we've had 64 separations, 51 resignations, 13 retirements. We've been able to hire 59 of those positions. We still have 30 and a half positions that remain unfilled, in which we're utilizing 24 long-term subs to fill. Some of those other positions are on hold, if you will, based on the need, based on numbers, doing some juggling around, creative scheduling, those kinds of things. But because of COVID and changing to virtual formats, it really has been, I mean, there's always something in terms of a highlight that you can go to. So we had to look at our practices. We've increased or created virtual formats. Just how do we get our information out? One of the best things that we ever did in terms of recruiting was just being there face to face, stopping people in the aisles, having those kind of face to face conversations and telling our story. Well, without the need to, or without the ability to do that, we've tried to do that in a digital format, making connections with colleges, getting that information to the people that are in charge of like student teacher placements, those kinds of things, so that they can anticipate where their graduates are going to and maybe what their interest level is in terms of location. So that's been good. Another thing that's been really a top seller for us is once we have a candidate come to Garden City, all pre-pandemic, of course, is being able to have like face-to-face tours, going to each building that they might accept a position in. And those principals really get to sell their building and try to convince that candidate that's the right place for them. So in the absence of that, we've created virtual tours of all of our buildings in order to have candidates be able to access that and at least have some background of what we're talking about when we offer them a job at Buffalo Jones or at Charles Stone's. They can get on and see that. Other things that we've done, we've tried to improve our website, our personnel page, just to make it a little more user-friendly, strengthening our partnerships that we have with the Chamber of Commerce. Also, again, just trying to increase the amount of virtual fairs that we're going to. Not only are we forced to do that, but in some cases, kids are going to be forced to get onto different career fairs and get outside of maybe their bubble that they have been locked in terms of geography on looking for jobs. On the retention side, I won't get into a whole lot of this, but really our plan in terms of COVID, and I'll explain that more when I do our COVID update. But what the board approved in terms of that plan and allowing staff to have, you know, COVID leave and doing the things with accommodations, I think has really went a long way in terms of our retention for staff. And then lastly, if a staff member does decide to leave, we've used exit surveys in the past, and those have all been paper copies that we send out once we receive a letter of resignation or retirement, just to get feedback on what we can do better as a district. And we've converted all those to a digital format now in order to increase the rate of return that we get, and that's been very successful as well. Questions about recruitment, retention? Okay, thank you all.
So I might just kind of wrap this up. The board strategic plan has 34 sub goals. So you've received, and in the board packet is a written report on every one of these. Several years ago, the board identified those first 5 we talked about tonight, 1.8, 1.9, 3.4, 3.5, and 7.1 as kind of the highest priority goals, sub goals for us to work on. So we've specifically reported on those, but we've selected a few others that we felt were noteworthy to report about. But you have a written report on all 34 of them. So we certainly are available for questions on any we've discussed or any others that you would like to inquire about.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you all for your hard work. We really appreciate it. I think this is a lot of really good information. So thank you. That takes us to the district professional development plan. Suzette, are you taking the lead on this?
I am. share my screen here. All right, so just an overview of the professional development for this year. Obviously, things were just a little bit different. We weren't able to have a lot of our typical face-to-face opportunities. Going out of district and traveling was also something that we haven't been able to do a lot of. But even with that, not everything was bad. It kind of brought about some good opportunities. We were able to do more virtual kind of trainings, which allowed more staff to be able to participate. It gave us an opportunity to start using some asynchronous learning, and our technology training increased significantly. We also, last year, since I've updated the last time, we sent in our 5-year KISA plan on professional development. And basically that plan covered what our emphasis of professional development will be. And that included collaboration, whether that's within the building or between grade levels or departments. It also focuses on our board goals and our KISA goals. And as Glinda mentioned earlier, they kind of coincide there, so that's kind of helpful. And it also has an emphasis on building and individual goals. So buildings make a goal for their specific building, and then each individual staff member makes an individual goal of where they want to make growth. It includes the purpose of our professional development, which includes increasing student achievement through professional development and furthering our staff's expertise. By aligning our professional development to the Kansas standards of professional learning, it promotes change and continuous improvement. And it also allows our PD to be planned for various opportunities for staff, which includes whether it's job embedded, whether we're using book studies, on demand, self-paced, in-person, or Twitter. We've been able to do a lot of different options, which has given staff more opportunities to participate. The plan covers the Professional Development Council roles. We meet monthly and look at the needs of the district and what we need to provide, as well as accepting professional development points in that for our staff. It lays out how buildings set their goals, as well as how individuals will set their goals for the year. And it also lays out the different level of activities for points. Knowledge points are worth 1 point, application are worth 2 times, and impact is 3 times the amount of points. So it kind of lays all of that out there. In our professional development this year, we try and tie everything to the top 5 board goals. They've kind of just went over those, so I'm not going to read those to you, but on 1.8, we were able to provide 20 different opportunities this year. 1.9, which is challenging and rigorous academic experiences, it's always our big one. We had 407 opportunities. 3.4, we had 11 opportunities. 3.5, we had 29 opportunities, and 7.1, we had 52 opportunities. These include instructor-led. Some of them are self-paced on our professional development platform, or on-demand activities either through the district or out of district. Some of our PD opportunities this year, we were able to have some live virtual sessions. 189 of those opportunities were through district presenters or out of district presenters. We have some self-paced sessions on Power Learning, which is our professional development platform. On there currently, we have 265 learning opportunities that staff can get on at any time and take a course or a session. And out of those, so far, 1,013 sessions have been taken. We have facilitator-led trainings, dyslexia being kind of how we started this. We have 6 modules for that, so the 6 different hours and trainings are broken up there. We just added one for paraprofessionals. We have 4 modules that includes teaching and for engagement and impact. And then for our ASQ, we were able to provide 6 modules that take a deeper dive, and each module focuses on a specific area of the ASQ, such as communication or fine motor or gross motor. And so if a student is having difficulty in one of those areas, it gives you some PD and some direction on how to help those students. Some highlights of our PD this year with new teachers. We, at the beginning of August, we weren't really sure what we were going to be able to do, whether we'd be face-to-face or virtual. So we started out with some asynchronous learning. So all the new teachers were sent out a link to the slide, and when they click on the slide, it had various different videos and learning opportunities on there that they could do on their own time at their own pace. We were able to do some face-to-face in August, so we had some breakout sessions. So we focused on curriculum. Our secondary focused on AVID. Of course, we had some technology and trauma. They worked with their mentors and then had some building sessions. The first semester, we were able to do some after-school support for our new teachers, and this was actually provided by 2 of our Leadership Academy students, and that was part of their project. And their focus was on classroom management and whole brain teaching, and they were also able to do some collaboration and discussions. Usually during this time, we have more elementary and very few secondary. This year, it was kind of flip-flopped, and we had a lot of secondary teachers that attended, which was really nice. And then here, just in January, we were able to do another face-to-face, and we were able to provide them with a poverty simulation and a session on cultural diversity. As Glenda mentioned earlier, we have some new curriculum this year. We have our social emotional curriculum. So our elementary is doing second step, and we had some training. We had a train the trainer in July, and then they were able to go back during the August building in services and train their staff. And then there were also some on-demand modules for them. And then our secondary is doing the CCC, the college and career competencies. Our intermediate centers are doing self-efficacy, our middle school is doing assertiveness, and our high school is doing self-regulation. And they've been able to have some live Zoom sessions. They're doing 4 this year, and then in between, each staff member is doing some coaching in their PLCs, and then they've had some job-embedded training as well. Our art got a new curriculum, and they've had some live Zoom trainings, and then within the art curriculum there's some built-in PD modules. Music is the same. They've had a few live trainings, and they as well have some built-in PD modules. And then with science, we've had a couple of live Zoom trainings. We had to modify that a little bit as we got the curriculum last spring. We kind of went ahead and set up some trainings, and then with COVID and all the changes, and some of the in-services needed to focus on some COVID-related areas, we had to kind of change and ended up doing some video snippets. So they created some videos of some specific areas of training that our teachers needed, which is kind of nice because then we'll have those so when we get new teachers coming up in the next few years, we'll have that training for them to be able to watch there as well. Community involvement was kind of an area that we weren't able to do as much this year because of COVID. A lot of the PD days were based on some building needs, so we didn't have as much district time this year. And some of the community, they want to do face-to-face, and we weren't able to do that again because of our COVID numbers and the restrictions. But Live Well was able to come in, and they provided the mental health first aid. Just here in January, we were able to train administrators and directors, and the nurses were trained, I believe it was in December. And then the Western Kansas Child Advocacy Center will be doing some mandated reporting training with nurses. And lastly, I just wanted to go over the Learning Summit. I included last summer because this is kind of where our change started, because we were home with our continuous learning. We kind of had everything planned, and because of COVID, we had to make all changes. And luckily, our trainers were able to switch as well and go virtual. So we were still able to have our 3-day summit, which actually ended up being a good thing. We doubled our participants since it was virtual. And all of our staff members were able to receive free books for each of the speakers as well. So for our upcoming summer 2021 Learning Summit, we decided to go ahead and keep it virtual just because we weren't sure what would happen when we started planning this in December, and our numbers were high, so we thought we would just plan that way. We have 3 speakers that will be joining us. Debbie Zakarian will be speaking on culturally responsive practice. Heather Forbes, who does a lot of trauma responsive sessions, will be talking about relationships and family culture, and then also how to assess classroom setup to be trauma sensitive. And then Weston Kishnick will be coming and talking about high effect instruction, the 12 habits of a master teacher. A lot of his falls in line with John Hattie. I know we've mentioned him in the past. So he'll be speaking to things such as explicit instruction, teacher clarity, relationships, and collective efficacy. We will be doing just a 1-day summit. Because of the year and we know everybody's kind of tired, we weren't sure we would get a lot of participation for a longer summit. So we will be doing a 1-day one. And then maybe in July or something, we're going to try and maybe have another 1-day one. All the participants that sign up they will receive a free book, 3 free books, 1 for each speaker. So we're kind of excited about that. This is our last year with our link money, which is how we are able to provide the Learning Summit. So we're glad to be able to do this one more time, at least to this size. And then I just want to end with some feedback that has been sent to us. One of the art teachers emailed me the other day and said this was the best PD and curriculum that she's had in the 20 years since she's been here. So that's always a nice thing when you're not sure, just because of the way things going, that you're having the effect on teachers and their meeting their training needs that you can. During the Learning Summit, we opened it up to people outside of our district. So we had somebody from outside of our district, and she really appreciated and got some really good ideas, which that's always good feedback to know what we're providing is helpful. And then there was a teacher that reached out about all the tech trainings that we've been able to provide. And I've also gotten some, I didn't put it on here, but some other feedback of just having it on demand, so that when they do have a moment and they have time, they can sit down and watch it when it's beneficial for them and fits in their time constraint. So that is all I have for an update. Do you have any questions?
That's great. I'm glad that people are finding it more relevant. I know that's been an issue in the past, so I'm glad to hear that we're heading in the right direction with that. So thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. We're headed there, but we're not done yet.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, that takes us. Thank you so much, Suzette. I appreciate your time and coming this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the COVID and FFCRA updates. Mr. Hogan.
Okay, thank you very much. Going to start with a little bit of data in terms of where we're at right now with our positive cases. So this first graph that you see is year-to-date COVID positivity, or the positive cases that we have in Finney County. This is the same information that we've been showing probably at every board meeting, but I will just note this week here is the week that we return back from Christmas break. And so you can see the nice decline that we have in our county in terms of positive cases. This is the positivity rate, same information in terms of this week here is where we return back from Christmas break. That rate is really going down significantly. I don't think we've reached single digit numbers yet, but on the verge. This is our positive students that we've had in the district. So this is our year-to-date number. That number will continue to grow or to head in this trend, because that's just everybody. As you get one more, you're going to be moving up on this graph. But this graph here is our current week by week in terms of positive students. Again, this week right here at this point is where we returned back from Christmas. So we saw just a little bit of an increase, but over the last 2 weeks, that number has been very minimal with our positive students. And positive staff, same trend. So year to date, this line here will continue to grow. But if you looked right in this range right here, this is the week after Christmas, and you can see over the course of the last 2 weeks, not quite flat, but almost flat in terms of adding to those positive staff numbers. And then down here on the bottom, of course, really, really flat with our positive staff that we've had. So thanks to the board, again, for recognizing the work of our school community and our outside community with the resolution that you passed, and just giving everybody thanks to allowing us to keep having face-to-face instruction. This is our absences by week. Lots of different information here. All staff absences, those that are COVID related, all staff, the classroom staff that are absent, again, any absences, and then those that are related to COVID absences. This break here is our Christmas break, winter break is the break in action there. But again, just highlighting the declining numbers that you see in this graph. Another different look at the same information, kind of a summary. This is just graphed over the last 2 weeks. So you can see not this past week, the previous week, we only had 6 students that were positive, 0 staff members. This week we've had 3 student last week we had 3 student positives, and again, no staff members. So for the last 2 weeks, not a single staff member testing positive. Sub requests, we've talked, I think, significantly about subs and the issues with getting subs. Had a couple different meetings where we were still able to meet face to face and kind of give a shout out or a cry out, if you will, for getting substitutes. That number is increasing, and we're seeing some of those results as far as our sub fill rate goes. So this is the number of requests that we had. This is the number of filled positions that we had. So these are the total numbers, but this is the average fill rate percentage for that week, 71%. Also pointing out here, this Thursday date, 20.5 sub requests, 20.5 filled. That's the first day all school year that we were able to reach 100% on our fill rate. That's even going back to the first week of school where we had very low numbers. I think we had 7 staff members gone that first week, and we were unable to fill them. So to be able to do that at this time of the year is significant. And again, just thanks to everybody who's helping with that cause, and 74% fill rate for this week. So put this into a little bit of perspective, we were probably in the 30, 40, low 50 percentiles in terms of our fill rate during those early months of school. So that has definitely been a positive for our staff and our students. These numbers are the number of tested staff members that we've had. We're doing more in-house testing now outside of the health department. and only one positive of those test results in those same 2 weeks. One of the things that we're able to do now is to provide additional testing, which I'll talk a little bit more. So Michelle has gotten some information, and we were able to be a part of the state allowing us to do rapid tests. So we did that for a very short amount of time, and then we had available to us for our own staff members to start administering the PCR tests, which are the more reliable tests. Difference between a rapid test and a PCR test: rapid, if it's positive, then you can know right then when you're getting it within 15 minutes. The PCR test is one that they have to send out, but the reliability is so much higher, but it does take 3 or 4 days to do that. And so with her efforts and working with the state and also our local health department, she's opened this up so that staff members can now request a PCR test that we can administer. But we've also opened that up to family members, household members as well. So giving us the opportunity to potentially test more asymptomatic people if they were interested in doing that. So that's been a big plus as well. We're getting into phase 2 or getting now in phase 2 in terms of vaccinations. And so Michelle and I and Colleen have been working closely to try to figure out the logistics on how to get staff members who are interested in receiving the vaccine, being able to get that done. You've probably heard a lot of communities around that are maybe already have done this. But this is a really big undertaking. And so I know it's my last bullet here, but really want to give a shout out to Finney County Health Department. This has not been an easy task, to say the least. What they are trying to do is they're going to try to administer vaccines for anybody that wants it in terms of school personnel in 2 days, February 18th and 19th. But that's not just us, USD 457. They are also including USD 363, which is Holcomb. They're also including the parochial schools, and they're also including GC3. So to be able to administer that many vaccines in a short amount of time has taken a lot of work and a lot of scheduling. So just really grateful that they've included us in that process and also just helped us with some of the logistics. So in order to get that process started, we did a quick little survey, SurveyMonkey, and send that out to all of our staff just to get a pulse of where people were at in terms of wanting the vaccine. So we had 1,022 responses in that initial survey data, which was about 87%. And for those of you who've just been, looking at our survey, that's really high, really in terms of any survey information that we get back. So we're really pleased about that. 567 of the people that responded said that they were interested in receiving the vaccine. Since the survey has closed, then some people, now that it's becoming maybe more of a reality, have reached out, said, hey, I didn't do it on the survey, but is there a chance that I could still sign up to do that? And we still are accepting those. And we've had 20 additional people say that they want to participate in the vaccination. So our first scheduled times are for February 18th and 19th. Again, we've worked with the health department and sent out all of our survey information to building administrators. The 18th is an in-service day for us. And so this is really important to be able to get this done in a timely manner, especially with Finney County helping, set aside or making sure that we have enough doses available in our community to be able to do this. So on the 18th, we have, both days, 18th and 19th, we've created schedules based on what the health department can handle. All those vaccines will be administered at the 3I building. And we'll have people going in different time zones, if you will, throughout both of those 2 days. And our goal, provided everything goes well, is that we will have everybody that wants to have a vaccine, they will be able to receive their first shot in those 2-day time periods. Just as a reminder, I know Dr. Carlin has put it out in the So You May Know, but if you have changed your mind or would like to participate in that, please reach out to him and let him know, and we'll get you signed up on the list. So after the first vaccine, the second vaccine will come, and that usually is between 28 and 32 days is kind of the magic window to receive the second vaccine. And although we've been waiting a little bit, and that may be frustrating for some of our staff members who, again, are hearing about some of the smaller communities being able to participate in this, it probably couldn't work out any better for us. So if you count forward 28 days from February 18th, it lands on the 18th of March, and that is our first day of spring break. And so without having to worry about schedules and school, those kinds of things, our staff will be able to participate again. Same schedule for those 18th and 19th days of February. We're just going to replicate that on the 18th and 19th of March. That is a Thursday and Friday. Both days are both months. And so if there are any side effects that people may have, we're hopeful that there'll be enough time through those 2 days and then the weekend that we will not be impacted severely when it comes time to have face-to-face instruction. So again, just really thankful for the work that they've done over that time. So the next piece that I'll talk about is FFCRA. So Families First Coronavirus Response Act is what the acronym stands for. This was initiated the 3rd of April was the first day. It's a federal regulation, and that went up through December 31st. So it's now has expired in terms of what our federal requirements are into providing that leave. There's 6 different qualifiers in order to qualify for COVID leave. And these are the 6. It's subject to federal, state, local quarantines or isolation orders related to COVID-19. You've been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine due to COVID. You're experiencing some symptoms that are COVID related. And the big piece here is that you're also seeking medical diagnosis. It's caring for an individual subject to an order described in number 1 or self-quarantine as described in number 2. Number 5 has to do with closing of schools or daycare as related to COVID. And then lastly, 6 is experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services in consultation with the Secretary of Labor and Treasurer. And I can tell you, no one can define what 6 is. That's not one from the very beginning that we've really had to address individually. But those are the 6 qualifiers. And so what does that mean? So duration of leave, essentially. So any one of those qualifiers has an amount of leave that you could take based on that. So reasons 1 through 4 and 6, essentially it's 10 days. It's COVID leave, it's 80 hours. And so that's how we've looked at it. Also for number 5, that's the one that relates to school and daycare. If those are closed and they get a little longer time period, you can take up to 12 weeks of leave under those provisions. The first 10 days of that is the employee's responsibility. And then after that, they get additional 10 weeks of FMLA or expanded FMLA leave during that time at 2/3 rate of their pay. And so again, fingers crossed that we don't have to utilize that anymore, but those are the kinds of things if our school district goes to a hybrid model, remote model, that's when that might kick in. Just as a reminder to the board that these COVID expectations under FFCRA, those were out early in terms of what may have been coming. And so this summer when we were writing our plan is based on these qualifiers and what our expectation was in order to meet federal guidelines. So everything that we've just described is really embedded into our plan in terms of addressing leave that the board approved in July. So that's been great and has been working. But as I mentioned before, now the date has expired. And so we wanted to bring it up and talk a little bit about it, the board's continuance with this. So how have we supported our employees through this process? How has our plan worked, in other words? So we currently have 14 employees that we've granted accommodations for that we've worked with. Those are on an individual basis. Every one of them is looked independently in conjunction with the HR office and also with building or department supervision. We've been able to do that. 3,422 COVID days have been utilized or captured. Again, when I talked about the 10 days that were available, that doesn't necessarily mean somebody would activate or use all 10 in a row. They may be symptomatic and need to take a couple of days off. They get tested, it's negative, they go back to work. So they only use 2 of those days. They would still have 8 remaining in the bank, so to speak. 576 employees have missed days due to symptoms. 592 employees tested. This information I should have mentioned is as of the 12th of February. 280 positive tests that we've received. 765 employees have been quarantined, and then 2 employees have utilized, again, as part of our plan, not necessarily set up through FFCRA, but with our plan, what the board approved is they did have available to them an extended leave of absence that they could take in terms of, prevention of COVID. So there is a cost to that, and KJ doesn't trust me to talk about numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that over to her and let her explain a little bit about what does this mean in terms of cost.
It's just because there's so many additional items to the cost, Heath. That's the only reason. So when we look at the cost of these FFCRA days, as Heath mentioned, there's over 500, almost 600 employees that have missed days. It totals a little over $500,000, and $500,000 sounds really scary. But I want to clarify that that is not necessarily dollars above and beyond what we would have paid had we not had FFCRA in place. And the reason for that is many of these days, we budget to expect everyone to come to work for every single day on their calendar. But in reality, as we all know, that doesn't happen. People take sick days, they take vacation days, they take personal days, and then sometimes they take days off because they don't have any leave days to take. So when you're sick and you don't have any sick leave days available and you really need to stay home, you just don't get paid for that day. So in order to actually calculate what this FFCRA implementation has cost the district, it would be pretty time consuming. And it's not that I'm lazy, it's just very individualized. We would have to go back through every time that a person took a day to see if they would have had any days available to take. And so what I mean by that is if Jenny takes a sick day, if she takes a COVID leave day, and she had sick days to take, we still would have paid Jenny for that day. So that's not an additional cost. However, if Jenny stays with us through next year and rolls over that sick day and uses that sick day next year, we're going to pay her for that day then. But if Jenny decides to leave us at the end of this year, we don't pay out sick days, which means we went 1 for 1 and we never would have had that additional cost. So it's very hard to tell without going through each individual time that someone takes a day to know, would they have had a day? Would they not have had a day? Are they still going to be here later to take that day? So in my very highly scientific swag machine that I do in my head, I was just trying to come up with what based on having seen the numbers, having seen the data of days that were taken, if I had to throw out a number, what do I think this cost the district to implement FFCRA? It's a pretty big swag. I would say it's probably somewhere between $75,000 and $150,000. But some of it we haven't paid out yet. We'll pay out later because they took days. They were given free days this year, but they'll take them next year. At the end of the day, we haven't spent any more than what we've budgeted for. So we're not spending more than what we thought we were originally going to spend, but I know we've spent more than we would have if FFCRA would not have been in effect. Are there any questions on that? Because I'm not sure that I made that very clear, because in my head it's a little jumbled, but
Now you know why she didn't let me explain it.
all right, you can keep going, Heath. Sorry.
All right, thank you. So as the board considers, again, no legal responsibility, but as the board considers to continue in our plan, and I just, again, like to take an opportunity to thank the board for your efforts at the beginning of the summertime and really reviewing our plan. Thanks to all the committee members, over 200 people involved in all the work that went into that. There are some other districts that are considering whether or not to continue with FFCRA guidelines. So here's just, again, unofficial. I'm a part of an HR listserv. We get together, talk about hot topics, and this was one of them. So this is all anecdotal kind of information. Topeka Public has chosen not to continue with their guidelines for FFCRA. Hutch was going to do it. Spring Hill was going to do it. Geary County was going to do it, but they were going to do it on a limited basis, end of February. Great Bend, Emporia, Newton, they're going to do something, but they may tweak it a little bit in terms of not carrying through all the provisions that are listed under FFCRA, but maybe some of them. Andover, Burlington, Eudora, Derby, they're most likely going to continue with what they had developed originally and carry that out through the fiscal year. So there's examples of a little bit everything across the state, again, anecdotally from what I talked to other HR professionals about. So before I get to, well, I guess I can go ahead and talk a little bit about questions, but before I get there, so early on when we went through this process and developing that plan, you know, there was an end date, December 31st. That was published right from the get-go. But if you would have asked me in November if I thought FFCRA would continue based on where we were at in terms of COVID, positivity rates, all those kinds of things, I would have said yes. So a little bit surprising that it wasn't re-upped. However, recent information from the National School Board Association talks a little bit about the Ways and Means Committee maybe looking at that and maybe doing something in the future, something as early as the end of March in terms of an expanded FFCRA. So it may come up again in terms of what our regulations might be or requirements might be. So before I get to a recommendation, are there any questions that I might answer for the board? Okay. So again, thank you to the board for approving that plan. Certainly understand that that plan is not perfect and not perfect for everyone. But based on the number of issues that we've dealt with for our employees, I truly believe it to be support for our employees. I think it's a good plan, a solid plan. We've been able to help lots and lots of employees through these struggles, through these times related to COVID. And so it would be our recommendation that we would continue with the plan that the board has approved in July and continue that with through the fiscal year. So if the board is okay with that, if they would like to do nothing, certainly there's no action to be taken tonight. And if we did nothing, then our plan would continue because it is approved by the board and it would continue until the end of the year. If the board would like to explore options, as I mentioned, some districts are maybe picking it apart and pulling out certain aspects of it. If that's something that the board would like to consider based on the information that we shared this evening, I guess I would just look for maybe consensus from the board if that's the direction that you wanted to go. And then we would have to circle the wagons and come up with some options that we could present at a later date. So with that said, I'll field any questions, or if Dr. Carlin, if you would like to add anything, please feel free.
Heath, if we didn't make any, if we didn't take any action, then the current plan would continue until we took action, correct?
it would end at the end of the school year. So we had that plan approved, Dr. Hannigan, through the end of our year. So June 30th, 31st, whatever our last day of our fiscal year, that plan would expire.
And what kind of HR problems are created by not taking action? In other words, not being able to see farther ahead than board to board or month to month.
So if you didn't take action, what HR problems would that cause?
Right.
I don't believe it would cause any. Maybe, in my opinion, by changing, it might be the contrary. I think people are used to our format. Certainly, we're working through that process, and not to say we don't have hiccups from time to time, but I think people know where the resources are. They know how we're going to support them. And so by the board not taking action and this plan continuing, I think that would be a good thing. But if the board, again, wanted to change something, you may cause a little confusion because we did it one way for the beginning of the year, and now midstream we're changing. Then the additional information that I shared about the National School Board, if that comes to fruition, where the federal government makes a change and implements something else, if the board were to change now, we may be looking at doing something later to make an additional change because of federal requirements. Other questions?
I think my thought was to bring it before everyone to see if we wanted to make any changes. I thought we should probably leave it as it is. But I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a will to change it since the federal law had changed. I think this shows the teachers that we are trying to support them as much as possible through all that they're dealing with COVID. And I think leaving it as it is hopefully shows them that we're continuing that support. And given that Ways and Means is looking at that, I mean, obviously anything the government does would overlap just like it has anything else, but with our plan. But I think this would still send a strong message to the teachers if we leave it as it is. At least I would hope it would. So I would suggest that we not take any action and leave it as it is, but I thought we at least needed to have a discussion about whether or not we wanted to do anything.
I'm good with leaving it as is.
Mark?
Yes, I concur as well, and I congratulate you and the staff for bringing it up, because it certainly was, as I recall, a strong consideration for entering into that plan, that being the federal requirements. And now that that's gone away, I think we need to make a conscious effort to review, as we have done here, and have a consensus moving forward, or at least an opportunity to raise a suggestion to go in a different direction. And I don't see a different direction being an appropriate thing to do.
Jennifer gave a thumbs up. Dr. Hannigan, are you okay staying? Okay. Dana?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Is there anything else you needed on that section, Mr. Hogan?
No, ma'am. I do not. Thank you very much.
Okay. Then that takes us to board open discussion. I'm just going to start with where I'm looking at with my Brady Bunch group. Jennifer?
I don't have anything.
Mark?
I don't have anything. I hope that we don't get a rolling power outage of some kind, because I heard today that maybe a score or two was kind of frigid in temperature, and that we could get busted pipes and we could have all kinds of challenges. I hope we don't. So it seems like so far so good.
Dr. Hannigan?
I don't have anything.
Dana?
I don't have anything.
Alex?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the audit team for the presentation today. I got a lot out of it. The numbers, the mill levy, our bond and interest that we're paying on. So I appreciate everybody's hard work. So thank you. That's it.
I just had a few things. Next week is Public Schools Week. So I know that the National School Board is going to be doing a few things with regard to that. I hope that maybe we can push some things out for that as well, maybe through social media, celebrating our public schools. Also, with the last round of stimulus money, there was some money that was left out, and it looks like the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, during their markup for their budget, is trying to get that $7.6 billion put back onto E-rate to help with the homework gap. So hopefully we can see some of that coming back through, because I know that we would probably qualify for some of that. We use E-rate money quite a bit. So hopefully we can keep track of that. There's also a lot of action going on in Topeka. So if you can please keep track of that as well, that's going to have some huge impact with regard to our funding. Senate Bill 61 did pass, but it doesn't look like it has enough to go with a veto override. So Senator Dahl did vote no on that. So thanks, Senator Dahl, for that, if you're so inclined. But there are two Senate bills with regard to the high density weighting, which is going to have a big impact for us. One that will have a sunset in 2023, and one that will keep it permanent. So that's one thing that we were really worried about last year. And then another one with regard to how we budget as well, needing to do a building needs assessment. So something to keep an eye out. And then our legislative coffee is coming up on Saturday. Also going to be on Facebook Live with the Garden City Area Chamber of Commerce page. And then one thing to keep in mind as well, if there were any small group breakouts that you might have been interested in attending with the KASB annual conference, those links are going to be available all year long. So if you're interested in attending, watching one of those, I don't know if you can still, I know I registered. I don't know if anyone else registered, but those links you can still watch. So hopefully maybe we can do something if you're interested in one of those. And then congratulations to our Buffalo swim team. They made a three-peat for WAC conference. So congratulations to them. And I think we've got some other WAC conferences coming up this week as well. So Dr. Carlin, do you have some things also?
Yes, Madam President. So first, we did have a broken pipe last night, a broken fire sprinkler pipe at Garden City High School. Thank goodness it was a fire sprinkler pipe because that set off the fire alarm. And so we found out about it near 8 o'clock and were able to get people up there and dispatched and took care of it before it became too big of a problem. Mr. Geis does have custodians regularly checking the buildings in these times of cold weather, but we're not there 24/7. So we are certainly trying to address those concerns, and hopefully, I'm with Mark. Hopefully, we we don't get to that point. Along those lines, certainly our weather has been interesting for Southwest Kansas. And coming from Wyoming, where this was kind of part of our yearly, this kind of weather was part of our yearly experience. It's nice to not have this kind of weather here regularly, and this long of a cold spell, and temperatures being this low. I did a little research, a little unofficial research. My research tells me that prior to this morning, the coldest days recorded in Garden City were March 11th of 1948, when it was 22 degrees below zero, January 19th of 1984, when it was a negative 21.1 degrees, and then third place was January 14th of 1979, when it was a negative 19.1. I believe this morning, the Garden City Airport recorded a regular temperature of minus 20 degrees. So I think today was probably the third coldest day in our weather record, according to the records I've been able to find. The wind chill was also minus 37, as reported by the airport this morning. So certainly some temperatures we're not used to experiencing, and thank goodness those aren't kind of a normal part of what we experience. We did take a snow day today, and we have announced tomorrow will be another snow day, kind of a combination. It's supposed to be a little warmer than it was yesterday, but still below zero temperatures and wind chills that are forecasted to be less than 20 below. And lower than 20 below, along with the news that because of this long cold spell, we are in the potential of rolling blackouts, and the information we've received from our utilities people are that these blackouts may occur with no prior notice. Even though they would be relatively short in duration, maybe an hour long. We certainly think if these happened, our buildings could handle an hour without power, but we also can't predict how well our systems will restart and what that will actually look like. So given all that information, we felt it was in everyone's best interest to have our third snow day of the year tomorrow. Now, I will point out that this year, due to the COVID changes we made in our calendar and changing the length of our day, we started this year with 4 snow days, the ability to have 4 days without going to school. We remain at that situation, and after tomorrow, we will have used 3 of those days. So if it's necessary to use another day at some point, that will be our last day, where we still will be able to comply with the hour requirement that the state has. So anything after that, if we have to miss school, would either have to be made up at the end of the year, or due to COVID this year, we do have a unique opportunity. If we do those days as remote learning days, then we would not have to make days up. So, so our plan would be to, if necessary, take an additional snow day when it's needed, but anything after the tomorrow and one day following that, those would, instead of being snow days and everybody stays home, those would become remote learning days. Again, if we don't do that, then it would be necessary to adjust our calendar and make up that time, or make up that time at the end of the school year, which would mean going to school in June. So sometimes people wonder why we conserve those days and we use them when conditions are, really serious and really significant, and that's why. Weeks like this really tell us why. So I don't know if anybody have any questions about any of that, anything I've shared with that. Good. So Also tonight, I think it got mentioned, but it's easy to gloss over. We had that annual audit report, and I know not everybody's on the edge of their seat except KJ when we do that, but it's really important to note that the work that KJ and her team did to get us the audit report that we received tonight is amazing. I think Teresa mentioned, COVID has created challenges for everybody, and our business office and KJ, it's no exception. We've thrown lots of different grants her way. We've thrown, over the last couple of years, there's just been a tremendous amount of work that's went into that, and I can't thank her enough for the leadership that she provides for our district and what her department does for our district. Because none of this works if we don't have the resources to get what we need to supply our people so kids can learn. So thanks, KJ and team. My last thing, Madam President, is two things came out last week. We haven't had a whole lot of time to look at those in great detail, but the State Board of Education released their Navigating Next guidance to help school districts kind of get from now until the end of the year and really plan for what's coming in the future. And then the CDC also issued some guidelines about reopening schools or keeping schools open. And so we're in the process of unpacking that information. We will be working with our teams that are our COVID groups that have helped us with our plan all year, and probably maybe at the next board meeting, maybe at the one after that, we'll be coming back to the board with some specific information about what we need to be doing as a district to finish out the school year strong, to make sure we're taking the right steps, we're doing the right things to not only finish this year but also be prepared for next year and what's to come next. So we haven't, like I say, we haven't had much time to look at that information, but we're starting to dig through it, and then we will be working with those groups. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carlin. Okay, I think that takes us to the next meeting of the Board of Education. Will take place on Monday, March 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. Hopefully in the board meeting room. Hopefully it warms up. It looks like it's supposed to, at least by, tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but the day after. It'll probably be, 90? I know I'm joking. I'm being flippant. And we have the need to go into an executive session. How long do you think we're going to need to go over everything?
I would suggest 30 minutes.
So 45?
I'd suggest 30. I think we can do it in 30.
Okay. So do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to our employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with a representative or representatives of the body or agency for 30 minutes starting, I'm going to say at 8:30 to give us time to get into the new Zoom meeting and going until 9 o'clock. I saw Alex say so moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Stephanie, do you want to call the roll?
Laura,
Aye.
Dr. Hannigan,
Aye.
Dana,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jennifer,
Aye.
Alex.
Aye.
I might note we do need to go to a different Zoom link, and everybody should have that in an email. It came in the same email as the initial link. So
If you had the link to get here, you have the link to get into the executive session. Okay. Thank you.